Tonight, Rachel Reeves addresses the nation. We've all got to muck in, she tells us, to help sort out Britain's finances.
Each of us must do our bit for the security of our country and the brightness of its future.
The Chancellor signals big tax rises in the budget later this month, but says it's not her fault, blaming Donald Trump, Liz Truss, among others. Meanwhile, the Conservative leader, Badenoch, responds with her own event straight after, accusing Reeves of blaming everyone except herself.
What she's doing is creating a lot of damage. Rachel Reeves is damaging the economy with tax rises. She promised last year, after the election, after her last budget, that she wouldn't come back for more.
I'll be joined by Reeves's number 2 in the Treasury, and I'll hear from the Tories on their reaction to today's budget appetiser. Plus, we'll be looking at Zoran Madani, the front-runner to become the next mayor of New York tonight, who's backed by none other than Jeremy Corbyn. Well, backing me tonight is Jonathan Ashworth and Tim Montgomery, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Tuesday. I'm Darren McCaffrey, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. A very good evening. Now, this morning started as one might have expected at this time of the year. It's early November, and so John Lewis launched their iconic Christmas ad. It's apparently very good, by the way. Not a surprise, though, given that we're only 6 weeks away from the most magical time of the year, that we should be talking about John Lewis and its Christmas ad. But seemingly determined to deny us any cheer in the weeks ahead was the Chancellor, with an unexpected and frankly largely unwelcome appearance at breakfast time. Now, why do I say unwelcome? Because it was yet another reminder of the pain in 3 weeks' time at the budget. Last year, Rachel Reeves promised she won't come back for more tax. But guess what? This year, she will. And today, there was more than a strong hint that those tax increases will hit most of us across the UK.
If we are to build the future of Britain together, we will all have to contribute to that effort. Each of us must do our bit.
Now, you don't have to be politically savvy to decipher what that contribution might be. And today, if you were in any doubt, it was a good old pitch roll to lay the groundwork, if you like, for the bad news to come. The budget will not be pretty, but at least we can say it will not come as a surprise either. What was interesting today, though, was that long and increasingly growing list of who's to blame for this mess. It was, wait for it, austerity, the Tories, COVID, Brexit, Putin, Trump, and of course Liz Truss. Now, to be fair to the government, some, even all of those, could be true. But Labour have also now been in power for 18 months. We have had one budget, we're about to have another. And if they don't get this one right, if we don't see genuine economic growth, a genuine increase in living standards, well, then Labour's name will definitely be added to that naughty Christmas list for many voters. They will also be to blame for the country's economic mess. Well, it has been quite the day and quite the build-up to that budget in 3 weeks' time. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, was inside Downing Street earlier for the Chancellor's breakfast address to the nation, and here is her report.
This is a once-in-a-parliament budget to wipe the slate clean.
I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
The Chancellor last year with a bombshell budget raising tens of billions in tax, promising it was a one-off. Until today, 3 weeks before the next budget, the Chancellor breaking cover as she prepares the ground to break promises made to voters.
If we are to build the future of Britain together, we will all have to contribute to that effort. Each of us must do our bit for the security of our country and the brightness of its future.
Each of us must do our bit. A message to you that your taxes could be going up. The Chancellor considering an income tax hike to help fill an estimated £30 billion black hole in the public finances, arguing that her alternatives, cutting public spending or increasing borrowing, are worse.
Austerity, reckless borrowing, made-up numbers. They are the problems, not the solutions. They are the mistakes of the past which would only take us backwards. I will not repeat them.
Laying the ground for a massive manifesto breach, the Chancellor sought to shift the blame onto global headwinds and previous Conservative governments. You told me explicitly Labour would stick to our manifesto commitment not to increase taxes that working people pay. Today, do you still stand by both those promises? And if you can't or if you won't, aren't you making a mockery of the voters that put their trust in you at the general election?
Today is about setting the context for that budget. And your viewers can see the challenges that we face, but the challenges that are on a global nature. And they can also see the challenges in the long-term performance of our economy. As Chancellor, I have to face the world as it is, not the world that I want it to be. And when challenges come our way, the only question is how to respond to them.
Will Labour's budget mean higher taxes, Minister? Why should anyone trust Labour on tax?
Ministers facing hard questions as they headed to Cabinet after the Chancellor's speech, bracing for the backlash that will come should the government break election promises. The current Tory leader leading the charge.
If this was to do with us, why has unemployment risen every single month since Labour came into office? Going back and saying, oh, actually, what happened in 2010 is the reason why we have problems in 2025, quite frankly, doesn't wash. Blame the OBR, blame the last government, blame the mini-budget, blame everybody except herself. This woman needs to take responsibility.
Today is a really big moment. The Chancellor laying the groundwork for really big tax rises, having said only a year ago she wasn't coming back for more. And while no decisions, I'm told, have been taken, the writing is on the wall. Taxes will be going up and perhaps income tax will go up too. Now, that would be a clear manifesto breach. It will bring acute political pain. But the Chancellor's decided her other options, increasing borrowing or cutting public spending, will hurt more. This is, if you like, a make or break moment for this Chancellor and this government, but insiders tell me they think it's a risk they have to take. Labour ran its election campaign promising to fix the economy and make people feel better off. Those promises seem further away than ever as the clock on this government runs down. Beth, Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, let's bring in our panel for this evening. Former Labour Shadow Minister and Director of Labour Together, that's Jonathan Ashworth, and Reform UK supporter and founder of Conservative Home, Tim Montgomery. Very good evening to both of you, gentlemen. Jonathan, you must be damn glad you're not in government at the moment.
No, absolutely not. It's a day in government is better than years in opposition. By the way, I'm not the Director of Labour Together anymore. In case you get any complaints from the big cheeses at Labour Together today. Look, we are heading for perhaps the most consequential budget or political moment of the Parliament. Yeah. Most consequential politically, most consequential financially. The Chancellor has decided that given the gap in the projections for the fiscal position, that she's going to have to take a tough decision on taxation. For what it's worth, I think, given what she's facing, and we're going to no doubt have a political debate about why she's facing it, but given what she's facing, she has to close that gap. Not closing that gap when borrowing is what it is and the cost of borrowing is so high could lead to all kinds of economic turmoil in the future.
But isn't, just Tim, I'll bring you in a second, but just on that very point, though, she is also there, and some of it is because of stuff before and external things, but she is also there in part because this government has not been prepared to make spending cuts that it clearly wanted to make. That is part of the problem here, isn't it, Jonathan? That the parliamentary party is clearly not prepared, whether it's the Winter Fuel Alliance, whether it's on welfare.
Well, I mean, she said she wants to return to some form of welfare reform, and actually I'm in favour of welfare reform. As well as the Shadow Welfare Secretary, I put forward a number of reforms to the way in which the disability and incapacity benefit system works. But she's also said that she believes one of the reasons why we're in the problems we have today is because for 14 years, there was a particular approach to public spending which didn't invest as much as it should have done in innovation, in R&D, in skills and tech. So she said, no return to austerity. And look, the one thing I would say to my colleagues in the Cabinet, though, is yes, there may well be a legitimate argument that Donald Trump's tariffs have slowed down the global economy, that Brexit scarred the economy, that we've had productivity problems. That's a very good argument. However, make a future-facing argument for these tax increases. Argue we are putting up tax in order to fund an expansion in the National Health Service, in skills, in R&D. Make a social democratic argument. Don't keep blaming the past.
Tim, though, I mean, Labour are blaming the past, and that is also unsurprising. I mean, to be fair to Rachel Reeves, it was quite a mess when Labour took over.
It was a mess, but it was the last budget, the first budget that she gave, was apparently, it was the biggest tax-raising budget we've ever seen in this country. And she said she wouldn't have to come back for more. And the trouble is I think, Jonathan, we know that at the last election, it wasn't just people like Rishi Sunak were saying, you know, bookmark this tweet. They will come for tax rises for you. It was people like Paul Johnson of the Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies saying Labour will raise your taxes. They won't be able to keep the pledge on income tax.
But Tim, this is why it's a plague on all houses, because Paul Johnson also said that no party, Labour, Conservatives, Reform, went into that election being honest with the British public.
No one was honest, but we do know through history that Labour is the party that raises public spending more than any other. They haven't, as you've already intimated at, they didn't control welfare spending. They can't control public spending. And I think what Jonathan just said is really important and honest. You said, make the case that Labour is a party that believes in public spending, and then we can judge them on that. The problem with what Rachel Reeves is doing is she's blaming other people for actually choices that she is making. These aren't about inheritance. This is about choices she's making.
As I was trying to demonstrate earlier, all these things actually can be true at the one time. We're going to pause there for a moment, though, because I did put many of these points to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. That's James Murray, who I spoke to a little earlier. Let's have a watch.
Well, what this morning was about the Chancellor setting out the context in which she's going to be taking decisions over the next few weeks as we approach the budget. Because, as everyone knows, all the decisions about the budget are taken on Budget Day itself, on the 26th of November.
Well, I hope the decisions are about Budget Day are made beforehand.
They're all announced, they all come together and they're put in the public domain on the 26th on Budget Day. What the Chancellor wanted to set out today was the context in which she's taking those decisions. So the challenges that we're facing as a country, some of the global headwinds, the uncertainty around tariffs, the global cost of borrowing, as well as some of the long-term challenges we face in the UK from bad handling of Brexit, from austerity and so on. And to put that context out there ahead of her taking those decisions at Budget Day.
And we'll come on to those in a second, but the context also is that we are going to see tax rises, aren't we, in the budget?
Well, all of the decisions about budget will be announced on Budget Day itself. It doesn't matter how many ways you ask the questions about what is going to be decided on Budget Day. That will be announced on the 26th of November.
The reason I say this is because we've been through this ridiculous game over the last couple of weeks where the Chancellor really heavily hints at it. I think today she said that essentially we're all having to contribute to that effort. Each of us is going to have to do our bit. Now, we know what that contribution is. You don't have to spell out the detail. Why not be honest with the British public today and say, yes, you'll get the detail in 3 weeks, but your taxes are going to increase, because we know they are, aren't they?
What I can point you towards is look at what she did at the last budget. Okay, so the last budget...
Increased taxes?
Well, no, the last budget we took some difficult choices, but the principles that we approached that question with are principles which are really important for us as a government. So making sure that we ask some of the wealthiest, those with assets, to make a greater contribution. Those are some of the principles which Rachel approached the budget with last year, and those are principles of fairness. Now, that's about fairness. That's an important value which guides us now. But going into this budget, what the Chancellor will want to make sure happens, and what we as a government want to make sure happens, is to protect the NHS, is to help people with the cost of living, and protect investment over austerity.
James, she said last year that when it came to taxation, she wasn't going to come back for more. That's what Rachel Reeves said last year at the CPI. She was not going to come back for more. Can you sit here in that chair tonight and say that Rachel Reeves in 3 weeks' time is not going to come back for more?
Well, what I can tell you about is the different context. No, what I can tell you about is the different contexts of the budget last year and the budget this year. So last year, we just got into office. There was a mess that we had inherited. We took some difficult decisions on tax, absolutely. I'll be completely straightforward. They were difficult decisions. But we did that to stabilise the public finances, to stabilise the foundations of the economy. And we've seen this year, we had the fastest growing economy in the G7 in the first half of this year. We've had hundreds of billions of pounds of investment, 5 interest rate cuts. But we're really clear that there's a lot more to do and that we've got some big challenges we're facing. And those big challenges that we're facing now are what the Chancellor is going to take head on going into the budget this year.
But the reason that this is really important, because as I say, we're playing this nudge, nudge, wink, wink game that, I mean, I get what you're doing. You're trying to pitch roll and get the public prepared for the definite tax rises we're going to see, because you can square this circle, which is you're clearly not prepared to make cuts to public spending. You've been clear about that. No return to austerity. You need to bring down the national debt, and yet the only way to do that is to raise taxes, isn't it? How else would you square that circle?
Well, the circle will be squared, or the decisions will be taken on budget day. But what is important for people to know, and what I think Rachel really wanted to do today, was to be upfront with people about what the challenges are that she's having to consider, that we're all considering as a country, and what the values are that are driving the decisions that she's taking. And so those values are about making sure that we protect families from high interest rates and high inflation, that we make sure we protect public services, and that we make sure we support that investment and get debt down.
Do you think the gambling companies should pay more tax?
Well, look, we know that gambling companies already pay tax. There's been a consultation about reforming the system of gambling taxation.
Do you think they should pay more tax?
Well, any choices like that will be announced on budget day, because that's how these things work.
Right, you're clearly not going to give us any detail, or even the broadest hint, which we, as I say, know taxes are going to rise. In principle, do you think it's good for political parties to break their manifesto pledges?
I think what's important for political parties is to be upfront with people about what's going on, and be honest about the challenges that we're facing. Because, let me put it to you this way, consider the alternative. Consider the world in which, we knew there were these big challenges that we were going to have to address at budget, but we decided to kick the can down the road, ignore them, hope they go away, not take them head on. That would not be responsible. That wouldn't be, I think, what the British people deserve. What people deserve is for us to be upfront about it and clear we're going to take them head on.
And that list, and it's a long list, and we'll go through, they're all there before the election. I come back to you at the question, in principle, is it good for governments to break manifesto pledges?
Well, I think you go into an election with a manifesto.
The answer to that, James, is no, isn't it?
You go into election with a manifesto. As the world changes, you need to be upfront with people about how the world is, and you need to be clear with people that you are going to take the right decisions for people, given how the world is, not as you wish it might be, but how the world is. And that important approach there is about saying, look, some of these decisions that we're going to take at the budget might be tough. Some of them might not always be popular, but we're going to take the right decisions for the future of the country.
OK, we had a long list today from Rachel Reeves. Seems to be a growing list of who to blame for this economic mess, and let's be clear, it is an economic mess. So we've got everything from, here it is, austerity, the Tories, COVID, Brexit, Putin, Trump, Liz Truss. You know what? It might all be true. In fact, many people would say all those things individually have contributed to the economic mess we're in. Should Labour be added to that list?
Well, look, we took some decisions at the budget last year, and we were clear that the decisions had consequences, but we were also clear that we took those decisions for a reason. So let's say some of the tax choices we took at the budget last year, which were difficult choices, we took in order to support public services. And you can see already the improvement in the NHS, which is a result of that.
Yeah, but what we don't see is an improvement in the economy. Because let's be honest, James, the budget last year did do some economic damage. You raised national insurance for employers. The unemployment rate is unsurprisingly gone up. We're also going to have the highest inflation in the G7. It's double what it was last year. Energy bills are still the highest in the developed world. It's not, Labour, now you're only a year in, but you have had a budget, but you have contributed to some of Britain's economic woes. Why are you, or should you be added to this list?
Well, I think everyone knows that some of the challenges we face in this country are international. They're global headwinds, the global uncertainty, the threat of tariffs, the global cost of borrowing is a global impact on the UK. And people also know that a lot of the challenges we face are long-term. People know that austerity, people know that the mishandling of Brexit are not things that you can get over in a year. These are longer-term challenges that Britain faces. So I think we need to be upfront with people about the challenges which we're facing as we go into the budget and take those decisions.
Just finally on this, how can you not say... our borrowing costs are continuing to rise. How can you not say, you've been in power now for 18 months, you are part of the contribution to Britain's economic mess? Well, whether you like it or not, you're in charge.
But we're really clear that we want to get the national debt down. We know that 1 in every £10 of public money is spent just servicing the interest on debt, and that's something that we've inherited.
It's going up.
That's something we've inherited from the previous government. And the reason why we have fiscal rules is about getting debt falling. It is about living within our means, and it is about making sure that we protect that investment in the future. Because what governments have done in the past, whenever there's been challenges they've faced, they've raided investment. They said, OK, we're going to cancel that investment in the future. And that's one of the reasons why we've been in such a difficult place as a country for many years under the previous government. We are determined to break that cycle and to invest in the future.
OK, James, thank you very much. Thank you. James Murray speaking to me a little earlier. Well, we've also heard from Kemi Badenoch as well, and we'll be getting the view from the Chancellor's speech with another of the party's leaders this evening. That is the Green Party and its leader, Zach Polanski. Let's have a watch of what...
I think it was a really panicked speech. I think it's very clear that Rachel Reeves and this Labour government just don't know what to do, and that's largely because they keep ruling out taxing multimillionaires and billionaires. It's only right that some of the wealthiest people in this country pay a little bit more from their wealth. But what we see far too often with this Labour government is so-called tricky decisions or tough decisions. Why are those tough decisions always for people in poverty, for disabled people, for migrants? And once again, it felt like in her speech today, she's laying out the carpet to make some more so-called tough decisions.
Well, as you can see, Jonathan and Tim are still with me. Jonathan, the problem here is, for the government, is that they boxed themselves in, didn't you? You guys boxed yourself in before the election with the fiscal rules and then also not being prepared to make actual spending cuts.
Well,
because
can I just say, if it is we're going to see increases in income tax, then millionaires and billionaires will be paying more tax. Yeah. Increases in income tax is actually a progressive tax rise. People on the left used to support increases in income tax. I don't know why the Green fella is complaining about it. But anyway, look, the government the Labour Party in its manifesto was always clear that tough fiscal rules had to come first. That there would be no playing around, messing around with borrowing, because we know what happens when you mess around with borrowing. It leads to turmoil on the markets, a run on pension funds, and people pay more in their mortgages. She is taking the tough decision. It sounds like it's going to be income tax, but this is all speculation. This is all smoke signals, but we all seem to think in Westminster that's what it will be, in order to manage to balance the books. If not doing that, not balancing the books, would lead to other problems on the market.
But Jonathan, the Prime Minister, and it wasn't that long ago, he said you cannot tax your way to economic growth, and apparently economic growth is the number one priority.
Well, you definitely don't get economic growth if you allow the markets to go haywire.
Well, but you also don't get it if you tax businesses, which they did last year, and then tax individuals, which they're going to do this year.
Well, look, the thing about income tax is that it does build up gradually, so it is actually quite a smart tax lever to pull. It's better than VAT, which when you've got inflation which is sticky would probably make inflation worse. She obviously can't do national insurance again because of the issues with the business community, as you quite rightly identify. So actually, income tax is possibly the cleanest tax lever she has got, if she's going to do that. She may well do a wide array of other tax rises.
Jonathan, you do a good job of defending this, but this wasn't a pledge by the Labour Party at the last election. It was the central pledge. It was Rishi Sunak in the debates with Keir Starmer said again and again, mark my words, Labour won't keep this promise. There was a level of...
It was almost a George H. Bush, read my lips.
Yes, it was. There was a level of deceit here, which I think, you should acknowledge, really. There was a level of deceit. Nearly everyone knew that this pledge would be broken. And I think, just for the sake of someone who cares about politics, I worry after this budget, not just the consequences for Labour, because no one's going to believe a word that Labour says on any big issue again after this.
Tim, the Tories said they weren't going to raise national insurance in the 2019 manifesto, and they did in 2022.
Yeah, but then they abandoned it, partly because of the political pressure they came under. I'm just talking... I'm not making a partisan... I'm trying not to make a partisan point.
No.
I'm making a point that just generally, when politics is held in such low esteem, making a central pledge in your manifesto and then breaking it, this isn't a small matter. This could have consequences for faith in politics for a long time.
Look, as I said, this is the most consequential moment of the Parliament, in my view. But also, I think the government ministers would say, and I think they have got some legitimacy in saying this, is that the global economic circumstances have changed. Tariffs is part of the global trading system now. I don't agree with tariffs. I'm a free trader.
No, me neither.
But nonetheless, we're dealing with tariffs now in the global economy in the way in which we weren't before. And also the United States has quite rightly put pressure on NATO and Western countries to substantially increase defence expenditure. Those were not factors at the general election in 2024.
And Tim, and to add to that, we know this before the election, but when you look at that long list I was showing, James, I mean, the Chancellor is right in saying all those things have made particularly our debt in this country, which is growing at an alarming rate, they have all massively contributed. And that includes the previous Conservative government, in part.
Well, I'm not here to defend the previous Conservative government. What I would say is, they haven't made the welfare cuts. They said that they would only invest in the NHS after the NHS was reformed. The NHS hasn't been reformed. The fact is that most people old enough will always remember that Labour is basically a party addicted to public spending. And they haven't been cured of that. The first decision they took was to give money to train drivers, to give money to the junior doctors who were protesting, wanted big pay rises. This is a party that has made its choices. Labour has made its choices, and its choices to increase public spending.
Okay.
If you increase public spending, you have to do what they're now doing, which is come back for tax rises.
Well, this is a debate that's going to end here right now, but one that will also carry on in the weeks and weeks to come. Because we are going to take a quick break here on the Politics Hub. Up next, though, we'll have more on that Chancellor's speech today. And we'll be hearing from Ed Conway on why she's laying the groundwork for those tax rises, why it's necessary, if you like, after the break. Do stay tuned.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force. It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. Now, we've been discussing Rachel Reeves' speech today, in which she didn't rule out any tax rises in that all-important, crucial upcoming budget. Well, our data and economics editor, Ed Conway, has been taking a look at how we've ended up here.
Now, the Chancellor has issued a warning about the budget's potential for higher taxes in the future. Why is this? Well, it largely comes back to the fact that she has got these fiscal rules. She set herself these rules. And one of the rules, perhaps the most important, is that she needs to get this. So this is the current budget, the kind of total amount of extra spending, minus all of the taxes coming in, that she has going out in the future years. She needs to get it up into a surplus, basically. And at the moment, this is the final year of the forecast horizon, at the moment, she's heading for a surplus of £9.9 billion, or she was last time she did the numbers. But here's what's the issue, OK? So there's lots of talk at the moment about headroom. That's basically headroom. So it's the headroom against the fiscal rules. And she had £9.9 billion back in March, But then, of course, events intruded. So all sorts of things have been happening since then. For one thing, there's higher debt interest costs for the UK. So out there in markets, we're having to pay higher debt interest. That grinds it down because you have to spend a little bit more money on those interest payments. On top of that, that brings the kind of amount of headroom down. On top of that, you've got all those U-turns that we know about. So welfare, winter fuel, that costs a lot of money, about £10 billion all told. So now you're down and the headroom is gone. You're in negative territory. The rules have been broken, but things get even worse than that because there were extra commitments that Keir Starmer has already said he's minded to do. So the two-child policy, that costs quite a lot of money, and a few other things as well, £5 billion. And you can see this gets smaller and smaller, rather kind of the shortfall gets bigger and bigger. And then on top of all of that, perhaps the biggest thing is the Office for Budget Responsibility is about to update its forecasts for how the UK economy is doing. It's saying we've got lower productivity than expected. That means less tax revenue coming in. Lo and behold, that's another potential £10 billion. So all of a sudden, what was £9.9 billion, about £10 billion, has become minus £17 billion. Now, this is just kind of rough rule of thumb, but the point is, if you want to get back from there to £10 billion, it's a lot of money. It's £27 billion. And if you want to get back to something like £20 billion, so, you know, to have more headroom and to try and ensure this doesn't happen all over again, that's the best part of £40 billion. But even if it's the short one, even if it's kind of about £30 billion, it raises the question, how on earth do you get to that £30 billion to fill the hole? And the short answer is, if you're not doing the big things like raising the basic rate of income tax or VAT, it's really quite tricky. So you could reduce the 2029-30 spending. There's no kind of concrete plan on spending by the end of this decade. So you could kind of reduce that, brings in kind of maybe about £5 billion. You could bring in about £8 billion by freezing those personal tax allowances that she unfroze in her first budget. Again, kind of unpopular, but it's not technically raising the tax rate. But you can see, look, and you've got other bits and pieces. You can have a higher rate of council tax. Doesn't raise all that much money. You can have closing CGT loopholes, might raise a little bit more, but you can see the bar isn't going up very quickly. Charge LMPs, limited liability partners, charge them national insurance. And gradually, things like gambling taxes, things like potentially higher rate income tax, they build this up, but it doesn't get to the £30 billion. And that is the issue for the Chancellor right now. She's facing the gap, even with all of those extra little fiddly things she could do, between that and where she needs to get, which is why a lot of people think that might have to be bridged, potentially with those controversial income tax increases.
Well, let's get more reaction to all of this. In the studio with me now is the Shadow Financial Secretary, Gareth Davies. Gareth, very good evening to you. Just watching Ed Conway there, Rachel Reeves is in a bind. I'm sure you would agree with that. But it's a bind, to be fair to the Chancellor, largely not of her making, of your making, isn't it?
Apparently, it's not just our making, it's everybody else. It's Donald Trump, it's Brexit, it's lots of different excuses. It's a Chancellor in front of us, apparently, that is completely allergic to accountability. She breaks out in excuses every time there's some poor data, but I'm afraid...
Well, I mean, I've interviewed Conservative ministers over the years who essentially have said quite a lot the same. I mean, whether it's COVID, whether it's Vladimir Putin. I mean, the tax burden was at the highest rate since, I think, the end of the war at the last election. So listening to a Conservative Party talk about tax rises is a bit foolhardy, isn't it?
I think, look, the punchline here is context. And if you look at the last Parliament, of course, we had to deal with some very significant global events that were genuinely impactful to our economy, to businesses and families around the country. And as a result, we had to support them with increased borrowing to the tune of about £370 billion. Now, because we believe in fiscal responsibility, it would be reckless to just let that go and to let other generations pay for that. And so, yes, we did, in the later years after COVID, make some very difficult decisions when it comes to raising taxes to pay down that debt so that we don't have...
Well, we ended up in the worst of all worlds where taxes went up and, of course, government debt went up as well. What would you do to kind of square this circle? Is this a return to austerity? That seems to be the kind of nudge, nudge, wink, wink from effectively your side of the aisle, if you like.
Well, just to clarify, debt went up, yes. We had to borrow more to support the economy and people, as I say, but we had to pay that down, and that's why taxes then went up. But if you'll remember, one of the last things we did in government was start to see that debt coming down, and as a result, we were able to cut taxes, and in fact, we cut national insurance twice in 2 fiscal events.
Having put it up, so...
Well, yes, and I've explained why, but having the debt coming down...
Well, just on that issue of national insurance, because I did put it to James Murray, I only thought about governments breaking manifesto pledges. Now, Labour, some accused them of doing it last year, but they haven't quite done it yet. You guys did, I think, in both 2017 with Theresa May and in 2022 with Boris Johnson.
Well, I wasn't around in 2017, but I can tell you in 2019 to 2024, we faced 2 major global crises.
We don't breaking have manifesto pledges is fine, if in the most extreme circumstances.
In the most extreme circumstances in a century, yes, it is, but nobody wants to do it. We certainly didn't like doing it. We didn't want to do it. But as I say, we had to get the debt down because it went up so much under COVID. But let's put this into context, as I was saying at the beginning. We're not in a global crisis right now. We have pressures, of course we do. We have tariffs, we have other pressures. But when you're running the economy, you've got to make sure that you're not overexposing the economy, and that's exactly what she did last year.
Yeah, Gareth, but the other thing that contributes to all of this is that the government did take over one of the greatest, or the worst inheritance, I should say, the greatest mess, the worst inheritance almost of any government. No, there might be loads of factors, contributions to that, but you have...
what metric?
Well, in the sense that how big our national debt hadn't been that size for generations, our public spending had massively increased under Conservative Party, taxation was at the highest level...
I've just explained why that was, and that wasn't a surprise to the Chancellor.
OK, I'll carry on. You said on what measure? Living standards have not increased in any substantial ways for the last 20 years. We've not seen any substantial economic growth since the financial crisis. I mean, that's pretty bad on all those metrics. Like, during 14 years of Conservative government, Labour did inherit a pretty bad menu.
Well, let me try and respond to that. So when we left office...
You could just say, that's true, yes.
Well, when it's not true, unfortunately. I'd love it for you to be true,
So what are those things I just say that's not true?
So we left office with the highest growth in the G7. We left office with 2% inflation, having had to bring that down from very high levels because of those global factors that I talked about. It's now nearly 4% under Labour because they pumped the system so much with public sector pay that it went up significantly. If you look at the debt, I've already addressed that and I've told you why that debt went up. And I remember coming on shows like this at the time of COVID, and very clever presenters like yourself were asking us why we weren't spending more, why we weren't borrowing more, because families and businesses needed more support. And we had to make some very difficult decisions on that. Then we had to put up taxes to pay down that debt. Fast forward to last year's budget, the Chancellor has made up a fictitious black hole to basically increase taxes by £25 billion that she said she wouldn't do on businesses, while increasing spending by £70 billion on public services. Yeah. And yesterday, the ONS said that none of that money has actually had an impact on public service productivity. Productivity in the NHS is actually down 1.5% since Labour came in.
Let's turn to what you did. I did pose the question earlier, and then I didn't give you the chance to answer it, which was on what the alternative is. And is it, because the Chancellor's going to increase taxes probably quite substantially. If you didn't want to do that, you may well have to make quite substantial spending cuts. Is that the Conservative plan? Essentially, austerity 2.0?
So essentially, yes. There's two options when you're in the Treasury. You can either reduce spending or you can increase taxes. And she's chosen that she wants to increase taxes. And that's, by the way, a perfectly reasonable position to have if she was clear about that before the election. But
I'm asking what you guys would do.
What we have said very clearly is that you need to cut the spending. And we started to cut welfare spending. We should have cut it more, by the way, and I'll definitely concede that. After COVID, it ballooned. But we were making progress under Jeremy Hunt to cut welfare spending quite significantly.
Well, I think the overall welfare bill was still rising when you left government. So I said, is this austerity 2.0? And you said yes. Is that
I didn't answer. Sorry, it was to the general context of your question, which is the choice between taxes and spending.
Are we talking about cuts akin to what we saw in the coalition government? I mean, to get the debt down, essentially.
I think you've got to get the debt down by cutting the welfare budget, whether you define that as austerity or not. I don't think I particularly would, but I think we all agree, actually cross-party, that we need to bring the welfare budget down because it's going way too high and there's too many people not in work that could work and should work and actually want to work a lot of the time. The issue and the difference between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party is even if Rachel Reeves did want to reduce welfare, I'm not sure she can because their MPs won't let her do it.
OK. Gareth, thank you very much indeed for joining us here in the studio. Thank you. Well, of course, the Chancellor's speech is going to feature in tomorrow's papers, and we've got our extended press preview, as usual, from 10:30 tonight with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us this evening will be the PR consultant Alex Dean and the journalist and author Christina Patterson. Well, let's get some reaction to that interview from Jonathan and Tim, who are with me. And Jonathan, Gareth's got a point there when it comes to kind of spending cuts, doesn't he? In terms of the Labour government did try to do spending cuts around the winter fuel allowance, around welfare, and their MPs essentially wouldn't allow it to happen. Oh, is that now all dead in the water, do you think?
No, the government's going to...
Because we have got you could call it a big problem, but we've certainly got a rising welfare bill that many would... And by the way, a welfare bill that's not just on people out of work, but for pensioners too.
No, absolutely. Now, what the government actually was trying to do was slow the rate of increase in the welfare bill, which is what the Tories also did, by the way. Yeah. The welfare bill wasn't coming down under them or due to come down under Labour. It's just a slower rate of increase. So this is a real problem. I do think the welfare system needs full reform. You hinted there about pensioners, all right? You know, pensioners get a very generous uprating in the pension year after year. It's called the triple lock. Politicians in Westminster don't want to go anywhere near it. It's only a triple lock. It's not the Holy Trinity. It's not sacrilege
well, to
debate whether this uprating should continue. But the Tories are talking about £46 billion worth of cuts. And they're saying they can get that from civil service reductions. You can't get £46 billion from paper clips. They need to be honest about the public services that will be cut back.
I mean, he said you can brand it what it like, but it does sound like the Conservatives are proposing quite substantial cuts, Tim.
The cuts, for example, that they announced at the Conservative Party conference in Manchester to fund their reduction in the stamp duty were cuts they didn't make in government. And, you know, it's easy to announce in opposition that you're going to make these cuts. It's very difficult in government. Look, Jonathan and I, we can have a cross-party moment here. I agree with him. I think where you're going on is triple lock. There was a time when pensioners in Britain, to the disgrace of our country, were paid less well than the average pensioner in Europe and the average citizen in Britain. Pensioners now earn more than the average Briton. Now, there is still some pensioner poverty, which is why you have certain targeted measures. But an honest government would say we can't afford the triple lock anymore.
Yeah. I don't think opposition as well.
Should Nigel Farage be honest about that?
Well, look, if I was saying from a position of fiscal health, yes. But the trouble is, as soon as he says this, the first party that announces this, they're going to be attacked by all the others. I'm afraid the triple lock will probably be abandoned when Britain hits a financial crisis. And it won't be abandoned until then. And that's when we'll get reality from all the politicians about we're spending too much on welfare, spending too much on pensioners in terms of the triple lock, we're spending too much on housing. We should be building houses on a much bigger scale to reduce the housing bill. That's the sort of bold measure that you take to actually bring public spending under control, because you build houses and they'll start to pay for themselves rather than paying the rent to private landlords.
OK. Jonathan, Tim, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. I just want to bring you some breaking news coming into us here at Sky News, and that is that Brussels Airport has been closed after reported drone sightings. That's according to Belgium Air Traffic Control this evening. It's been closed, as I say, due to that drone sighting. We may remember particularly Copenhagen Airport was closed several times over the last couple of months due to drone sightings, though no quite sense where these drones have come from. But as I say, the airport in Brussels, a pretty major European airport, is closed tonight. No planes are either taking off or landing. That will bring pretty substantial travel chaos to that part of the world. And we'll bring you more on that story, of course, as we get it here on Sky News throughout the evening. OK, let's return now to the budget. And one of the reasons the Treasury is struggling to balance those books, it's because the UK has been struggling to create that thing called economic growth. And the government is betting somewhat big on AI to boost productivity and efficiency. But how much are they actually spending? Well, new exclusive data has revealed that the scale of that bet, more than £3 billion, has been spent by departments since 2018. Well, here's our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, who's been looking at those numbers.
Artificial intelligence, AI. Keir Starmer says it will improve public services, put money in your pocket and create jobs. Politicians are betting the house on it. But exactly who is spending what on whom? Well, we've got consultancy Tussle to exclusively analyse the data. Here is the overall spend by government departments, £3.35 billion on AI contracts, infrastructure and services over the last 7 years. And it's ramping up fast. I want you to look at this. This is the number of new contracts signed every year. And here, 2025, well, it's the highest so far. And actually, this number's only for the first 3 quarters of the year. So who are the beneficiaries and what are they doing? Well, this is all of the government contracts by size, by company. Look, you can see over here, the recently privatised laboratory of the government chemist, or over there, there's Amazon, PA Consulting, which often does intelligence services, Deloitte, lots that you'd recognise. But the biggest contract of all is a 2021 contract by the Met Office with Microsoft to build the world's most powerful weather and climate forecasting supercomputer. They've also got a few smaller contracts for departments to use Copilot AI. Then there's another big contract with Init, a German public transport company, and that's just with one bit of the transport network, Transport for London, worth over £250 million. But this you might find surprising. Look at this tiny dot here. That is Alphabet, the company behind Google, and a massive AI investor, but they've got just 2 contracts, one with the Ministry of Justice and the other with gov.uk. That doesn't feel like a revolution, does it? Meanwhile, the US firm Palantir has lots of smaller value contracts worth $376 million. Now, their UK boss sat down to tell us what they're doing.
So in health, it's helping junior doctors draft discharge summaries. In defence, it's helping intelligence officers collate lots and lots of information and process that more quickly.
Some people will worry about big American companies coming in and using their data. What do you say to them?
Those are very legitimate concerns, and they're right to interrogate this, but Palantir is actually the answer to those problems. We are the way you keep data secure, and we are the way you make AI transparent and auditable.
Everyone from the Prime Minister down says they get it, they get AI. Is that your experience behind the scenes?
Yes, they get it. What they're saying publicly is what they're saying privately. But the challenge is always a fear of change. And in this case, you've got to embrace change. And ministers need to be brave. They need to take on the system and tell them this is the way things need to work today.
And what's the problem in the system?
It's a resistance to change. There is a lot of fear that tomorrow I'm going to have to do a different thing to what I was doing yesterday.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I want you to look at spending by government department. Here it comes. And you can see the Department for Science and Technology, they're at the top. They've got that Met Office contract. Department for Transport, they're second. We told you about the TfL contract. But did you know which are the biggest data departments? Well, they're all the ones all the way at the bottom. Here, the Treasury, which runs the Taxman, HMRC, and the Department for Work and Pensions, which runs the benefit system. Did you know that DWP IT alone costs over £1 billion a year? Yet it spent just £73 million since 2018 on AI. Now, it's those kinds of areas that some of these people think the biggest gains can be found in. These are all the bosses of the biggest tech companies schmoozing at the US-UK state banquet in September. Tim Cook from Apple, the bosses of NVIDIA and OpenAI. You've also got the head of Google and the global head of Palantir meeting the Chancellor and the Defence Secretary. And these up here are the promises that help them get a seat at the table. Not official contracts. Actually, many of them are free trials and proofs of concept. But one person involved told me that the British government could have demanded so much more than this ahead of appearing at an event like a state banquet. They blame short-term mindset, a lack of expertise, backwards technology. Up to 60% of some bits of government are running on legacy or older versions of IT. The areas of government where a revolution could save us the most money as yet unexplored. The AI journey has barely begun.
Well, as you can see, Sam is with me in the studio. And Sam, this all feeds into, the big story that we've been talking about today, and we're still 3 weeks away. What's your assessment of what's happened today and where the government are in all of this?
So the point of today was that the Treasury had acknowledged that the public have no idea what's coming down the track on November the 26th. Tax rises, the scale of the tax rises, despite multiple promises that wouldn't happen from Labour government. And so today was a job of educating and trying to parcel out the blame. Now, will the job of education work? We'll find out. I think business certainly took note of what was happening today. And, some figures in business messaged me to say that, what they heard from the Chancellor will have a bit of a chilling effect as they wait to find out what's in the budget. The problem is that the scale of what we are looking at, as Ed Conway was demonstrating with his screens, as I've been saying for a couple of weeks now, we are looking at 20 to 30 billion pounds, if not more. Now, there can be some spending cuts, but broadly speaking, that's mostly going to come from tax rises. And most of that could be funneled on maybe the top third of people on the income scale. It's just an incredibly large amount of money. I do wonder whether there's even, as it were, a democratic mandate for this still. I think this morning was an attempt at trying to construct one. But one more thought, Darren, which is this. Rachel Reeves was trying to lay it at the door of almost anybody else, Tories, Brexit, COVID and all the rest of it. You can make that charge about the broader economy, but that is not the essay question on November 26th. The essay question on November 26th is, how does she fill a black hole against her fiscal rules? How does she make sure she doesn't breach her own self-imposed borrowing limits? And the reason that she's on course to miss them are entirely, for large part, self-inflicted. But in large part, it's not the productivity downgrade that you can blame on the past. It's the fact that they couldn't get welfare changes through, that they've done U-turns on winter fuel, that debt costs more than it did when it was last assessed by the OBR in March, that they're choosing to spend more money probably partially scrapping the two-child benefit cap. All of those reasons, which you cannot lay at the door of the Tories, are the reasons that she's having to come back to more from the public.
OK, Sam, as always, thank you very much indeed. Sam Coates there. You're watching The Politics Hub. We're going to take a break. I'm going to talk about something a little different because New Yorkers are heading to the polls to elect the next mayor. We'll be looking at who's likely to win and what it means in just a couple of minutes.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8 o'clock, we'll have the latest as the Southport attacker's brother gives evidence to the public inquiry into that attack. Also ahead tonight, Sir Alan Bates agrees to a 7-figure settlement over the Post Office Horizon scandal. And I speak to Rio Ferdinand about his foundation and how he hopes to inspire the younger generation. And, of course, we'll talk to him about his old teammate, Sir David Beckham. Well, that and much more to come on the UK Tonight from 8.
I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Over the next 45 days, an estimate 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional. This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. We take you to the heart of the story in the largest democracy in the world.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy. Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
The Data and Forensics team is a multi-skilled unit dedicated to providing transparency in journalism. We followed a social media trail that led us to Bristol, where a confrontation between protesters erupted into a full-scale riot.
Here it really is pitched battle skirmishes, hurling missiles, throwing punches.
We gather, analyse and visualise data to tell data-driven stories. Sky News has been given exclusive data. Sky News has seen 72,000 posts used in this way. Elon Musk says it is, quote, a viper's nest of radical left Marxists who hate America.
I think we would generally be called far right, sure.
It's called Return to the Land, and they invited me in. Its founder says he is building a fortress for the white race.
I kind of want to ask you, after seeing this, do you think what we're doing is immoral?
I'm Tom Cheshire, Sky's data and forensics correspondent.
Now, New Yorkers are heading to the polls to vote for the next mayor. It's been an increasingly bitter race to become the city's leader. Democrat candidate Zohran Madani is the frontrunner, facing off against the Republican Curtis Silway, who is also running against the independent candidate Andrew Cuomo, who Donald Trump is urging voters to back. Well, the US president is threatening to cut federal funds to his home city if Mr. Madani wins. But the Democrat has been running a pretty charming campaign, particularly on social media, with lots of viral moments, and he's been dubbed the Internet Mayor. Let's have a look.
I know it's not yet Valentine's Day, but I can't wait any longer. Will you be my Democrat?
How's it going, guys? Do you have 60 seconds to talk to us about the election?
For all my African people to vote for
Thank you, my brother.
Because I know with you, New York City will change.
My name is Zohran Mamdani, and I'm here because we only got 3 days until the election. 3 days until we can win a city we can afford.
Jonathan, he is a pretty good campaigner. He's even got the support of Jeremy Corbyn, as you can see.
Yeah.
What do you think? First socialist mayor of New York?
Well, good luck to him. He's suffered a lot of Islamophobic, racist abuse in this campaign, which has been disgusting. But good luck to him. I mean, he's got Jeremy Corbyn's support. A lot of people are getting worked up about Jeremy Corbyn backing him. I mean, I don't know why people get the knickers in a twist about this stuff. I mean, if Jeremy Corbyn wants to back him, that's up to him.
Tim, what do you make of him?
Well, anyone with Jeremy Corbyn's backing, I would worry a little bit about, because he's not exactly a great vote winner or not particularly middle of the road. I worry about New York. And it's true that he may have faced some Islamophobia, but some of his remarks about Jewish people, I do worry about.
You're not a fan.
So I'm not a
OK,
fan.
well, I think we're going to get the results later on tonight, or certainly tomorrow. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. That's it from me for tonight. Back tomorrow at 7. SJ is up next.